Welcome to Bits About Books, the home for conversations with authors of breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. I am your host, Shubhanjan Sarkar, founder of Pitchning, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where our mission is to make buying easy. Our guest today is Charles Green, and we speak with him about his classic bestseller, Trusted Advisor, which he co-authored with David H. Maister and Robert Galford.
A trusted advisor is someone on whom you want to depend or rely upon for advice or perspective around something important. It may be personal, it may be business. And if you think about, well, how do we behave as people? Who do we trust? Who do we look to? It's not a very large number of people. It's not like we have 30 or 40 trusted advisors in our life. We may have some in different areas, but by and large, it's a one-digit number.
Charles H. Green is an author, speaker, and world expert on trust-based relationships and sales in complex businesses. Founder and CEO of Trusted Advisor Associates, he is the author of the critically acclaimed Trust-Based Selling and co-author of the classic The Trusted Advisor and its practical follow-up, The Trusted Advisor Fieldbook, a comprehensive toolkit for leading with trust. Charles works with complex organizations to improve internal trust within and between organizations and trusted advisor relationships with external clients and customers. Charles spent 20 years in management consulting before founding Trusted Advisor Associates in 1997. He majored in philosophy from Columbia and has an MBA from Harvard. A widely sought-after speaker, he has published articles in Harvard Business Review, Directorship Magazine, Management Consulting News, CPA Journal, BusinessWeek, Forbes.com, Investments, and Wealth Monitor. Charles has worked with over 100 companies to develop trust-based leadership and sales. Included in his portfolio of clients are blue-chip companies such as PwC, Prudential, Cisco, American Express, Intel, Deloitte, Accenture, Ernst & Young, HP, Shell, UBS, and Oracle. Now, onto this classic session with Charles H. Green. Charlie, welcome to Bits About Books. I'm delighted to have you here and talk about a book which you wrote a long time back.
A long time ago. Thank you, Shubhan. Delighted to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
You know, I'm just thinking at the time when you wrote this book,
Yep.
at least conceptually, it would have been way ahead of time.
Somewhat, yeah, I think so. Maybe a little bit.
Not that trust was not a factor,
Right.
but the fact that you need to build trust was not a factor.
It was underappreciated. That's correct.
Yes. And I think today we are in a strange sort of world where we all talk about building trust,
Yep.
but mostly do nothing about it.
Mostly, I think that's right.
What I would like to know is what prompted you and your co-authors to actually decide that, hey, you know what, we need to write this book.
Well, it was maybe a little bit different than some of your other guest authors. We wrote it when I was, I want to say, 50 years old. And I hadn't written a book before. I hadn't thought really of writing a book before. I knew Rob Galford, one of the co-authors, because we met in business school. We were in the same section, the same class, and we became good friends in business school. And we stayed friends, and Rob later joined the firm that I was working for. And he left, and we started talking, and we started listing all the things that we'd done wrong in our careers in management consulting. And I forget exactly how, but we started saying, you know, let's write about what it is to be like an advisor. We didn't have the title in mind yet. But we started thinking maybe there's something here. Maybe we should do some workshops and maybe this could turn into a book. And we started shopping it around to agents and publishers, and none of them were interested. They all said, sounds like a wisdom book, and wisdom books don't sell. Data books sell. The reigning book at that time was Good to Great, which was chock full of data. And then we ran into David Maister, whom both of us had known briefly. at Harvard Business School. I got to know him later. He was at Harvard at the time. And David had already written, I think, 7 books. And Rob ran into David and they had a conversation, and Rob described to him what we were thinking about. And he said, gee, I'm kind of writing the same book. And here's a deal. If you want to join forces and make me lead author, then I will solve your publishing problem. So we thought a nanosecond and said, welcome, lead author. And he picked up the phone and he called Simon & Schuster, and boom, we had our book deal. I forget when the title came up fairly early on. The word Trusted Advisor was already in common usage. You couldn't copyright it. It was already being used in TV ads and so on. But it seemed like the right title. So anyway, that's how it came about.
What was sort of going on in the marketplace that you were operating in?
Yeah.
Where the question of a trusted advisor was prominent, which is why you thought that we should do workshops on this and we should potentially write a book. So what was really going on? Describe a bit about what was it?
There was nothing going on in the marketplace, or at least not that we paid any attention to. What it was Rob, all 3 of us kind of thought, we'd all had experience in consulting. We all worked mainly with professional services firms as clients, like law firms, accounting firms, consulting firms, ad agencies. And we became fascinated with the changes that each of us had undergone individually and what we had learned about how to be a good consultant, how to get people to take your advice. And I think we all kind of enjoyed the interior psychological explanation of what made it work. How does this come about? Because that is sort of a core question for anybody in a consultative profession. That includes lawyers, accountants, and so forth. Even more broadly, how do you get people to take your advice? That opens it up to the field of sales and marketing, lots of other areas. I mean, many of us have to figure out how to get our advice taken. So the interest was not what was going on in the market. It was what was going on in our heads. How do we explain success in our profession? How do we give advice to people? One of us said at some point, the book is just 100 mistakes, all the mistakes we made, and trying to help other people figure out how not to make those same mistakes. So that was the motivation, not any observation about the market. We didn't expect it would sell very much at all, honestly. But it's, we did a 20th anniversary edition a few years ago. It sold about 500,000 copies over 20 some years. So it turned out to be more successful than we thought it would be.
Right. Interesting. So both of you and David, you had similar ideas because all of you are consultants. So you're seeing the need to be trusted so that you can possibly consult more.
Right.
Now, and you found each other. This was great, right?
Yes, right.
So you have the lead author, you got the publisher, now you're writing the book.
Right.
What happened next?
Well, in writing the book, by the way, I'd never recommend that anybody try to write a book with 3 authors. It's very complicated. In our case, that we quickly defaulted. David's kind of a natural project manager and a very dominating personality, and he'd done it before. So he said, why don't I be project manager? And we said, sounds like a good idea. So we sort of took orders from David and as to how to do this. And we mapped out different chapters and wrote them and reviewed with each other, and it worked out very well. And after the book came out, we started getting some leads, and we had to decide how to share leads among the 3 of us. And so the relationship continued in some ways. The book came out, and we hired a publicist, which was not very helpful. We had to figure out how to promote it ourselves.
So, okay, again, I'll dig a little more.
Sure.
What was your writing process? So, at the point when you met, did you and Rob,
yes,
did both of you already have a structure in place, and did David have the similar thing, or
no? There was no structure. We just had a soup of ideas floating around. David helped impose the structure on it, which was very helpful. So he suggested an outline, which I've later learned is pretty good. Decide, you either have 2 parts of the book or 3 parts, not 4, not 1. And then within each part, you have a number of chapters, maybe 6, maybe 8, maybe 10. And then once you've labeled, what all the chapters are, then you dig down and write it. And what we did was, Rob, you write this chapter, David, you write this one, sort of according to our more specialized area. Then we would review it with each other to get kind of a common language. I think we were all fairly decent writers, and we all. I had an undergraduate degree in philosophy, which is very structured thinking. But we'd all been subjected to good business writing, so we knew how to be punctual, straightforward. So we didn't have problems with each other's style.
How long do you think you took to write the book, the first draft?
Uh, I'm gonna guess it was maybe 6 months.
That's very good, actually.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. You're right.
Because I have heard many timelines in this podcast, and
No,
I
6 months is not too bad. You're right.
and with three people involved,
Yeah.
I think that's tricky, right?
That is tricky.
Yeah. So once you had the first draft ready, did you invite inputs from your colleagues or customers to say that does it resonate, or was it something you straight away took to the?
No, all three of us, I think, were fairly arrogant, and we knew what we thought was good, and we weren't interested in getting other people's input. The editors that we dealt with were, pretty good as editors go, and we respected what they had to say, but they were more technical,
Right.
more than proofreading, but less than dealing with the whole scope. So we kind of dictated what we thought the book would do, and fortunately, our publisher was very receptive to that. It didn't hurt that David had written 7 books before. He had a good track record.
Of course. So did you? I'm curious. Did you have some points of conflict where three of you didn't agree on something? You said, no, this is not how it is to be. Can you recall any of those?
Well, there weren't substantive points of conflict. I mean, there were different points of view, and one of us would go deeper. But there were personal conflicts. To this day, David and Rob will never speak to each other again.
Really?
And I'm the one in the middle. One of them calls me if they want to talk to the other. It's great. I mean, and that's just personality stuff.
Right.
Rob is very broad brushed and knows something about everything, but he's not known for going deep vertical. David is just the opposite. And David is very precise and practical and to the point and blunt, and Rob is very diplomatic. So there's just oil and water. Personalities don't mix very well. So that was a factor. But we got through it.
So I presume you had the most fun out there.
Yeah, well, or the most difficulty, I don't know. It's hard being a go-between.
Okay. Did you, obviously you were reviewing each other's work.
Yes.
What kind of suggestions were coming? Is it like, okay, this chapter actually you need to break up into 2, or this portion of your chapter actually should go into my writing? Did you have such kind of?
Yeah, there was some of that, although I think we fairly early on agreed at the overall structure. There wasn't too much disagreement about that. But yeah, we would, but in general, I think we naturally defaulted. Rob, you know more about this one. Charlie, you know more about this one. And there wasn't a whole lot of structural disagreement.
Okay. And when you said structure and the division of work, it was not about you write part 1, I write part 2, you write part 3, but it's actually in part 1, you write these 2 chapters.
Exactly.
That's how it was.
That's right.
Right. Yeah, as you said rightly, that it was linked to who has the most expertise in that area.
Right.
And that was your deciding factor.
Yes, exactly.
Any interesting stories of this period that you want to share while the book was getting made?
Oh boy, let's see. Well, I'll mention one. It wasn't exactly a story, but I've written or co-written 3 books, and in the first 2, we used a publicist, which used to be a fairly valuable role in the book publishing industry. It's gotten less and less relevant, and it wasn't until the 3rd book that I figured out an entirely different way to think about book promotion. And you basically do it yourself. Honestly, the publishing houses aren't that much help. You kind of have to do it on your own, promote yourself. So I figured out for the 3rd book how to do that. And it was basically reach out a year ahead of time and connect with all the people that you would love to promote your book and start promoting them. Comment on their blog posts, comment on their articles, and build up a common thread of interest. And once you've established a dialogue with someone, it's not hard to say, by the way, I have a book coming out. Would you help me promote it? And they'd say, sure, of course. Anyway, so that was a learning that came much later, but I would point to that.
It's so much aligned to what you have written. So you essentially, what you do is build trust over a year before you ask for a favor.
Well, that's true. And to your point, I that book and the subsequent two have really, I've tried to make them a guidebook for my life. I do try to live my life according to the kinds of principles that we enunciated in that book. And so it's been very personally important to me. It's not a dry technical topic. I really think this is a guide for how to think about doing business. And I try and, practice those principles in all my affairs.
Wonderful. That's a great segue to actually get into the book.
Okay.
Let's start talking about it. Who is a trusted advisor?
That's a good way to get into it. A trusted advisor is someone on whom you want to depend or rely upon for advice or perspective around something important. It may be personal, it may be business. And if you think about, well, how do we behave as people? Who do we trust? Who do we look to? It's not a very large number of people. It's not like we have 30 or 40 trusted advisors in our life. We may have some in different areas, but by and large, it's a one-digit number. If you are somebody whom you trust to give advice or perspective. And I think a lot of what the book does is break down what does it mean to trust someone, what does it mean to be trusted by someone. And those two components, particularly what does it mean to be trusted by someone. And we examine the dynamics of trust and how it goes wrong and how to make it go right. So much of the book, some of it's about advising, but most of it's about trust.
So talk a bit about, you have written a chapter on earning trust, right?
Yes.
We talk of building trust, earning trust. What is actually the process? And when somebody says trust, I trust you,
Yeah.
there are two ways of looking at it.
Yep.
There is one oft used metaphor is that trust is like pregnancy. Either you are trusted or you're not.
All right.
I mean, you can be somewhat pregnant, so it can be that I somewhat trust you.
Yeah.
At the same time, in the practical life, we actually do that way because we trust somebody in certain areas but may not be in others.
That's exactly right. The second metaphor is the right one. Yeah, because you're right. You're right.
So tell us a bit about. I mean, if you are advising a company about sales or technology or human capital or whatever,
right?
What is it that you need to do ahead? Because the trust has to be there before them to come to you for advice, right?
Pretty much true. Or, if they come to you for advice and there's no trust, they may still take your advice, but only in very narrow technical ways with low risk to them. So, I might trust the online technical manual for my MacBook Air.
Yeah.
So I'm trusting, I guess, in some sense that Apple knows how to write a manual and they know what their technology works. But that's not a very high bar. That's pretty low degree of trust. If we're talking about something much more complicated, if I'm hiring a law firm, if I'm hiring an architect, or if I am a law firm or an architect and I want to get hired by somebody, let's take that case. What do I have to do to earn their trust? Because people don't likely make big decisions without some level of trust. And I think this may be useful to talk about what we call the trust equation, which turned out to be the most popular part of the book. It's really the trustworthiness equation. And we suggest there are 4 components to being trusted by someone. You want to be trusted. It's of the form A plus B plus C over D. Credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. Credibility, all the numerator factors obviously increase trustworthiness. The denominator factor reduces it. So credibility is basically expertise, competence, that kind of thing. Are you good at what you do? Do you understand your product, your service? Reliability, dependable, predictable. You keep your word, you do what you said you do, you got a track record, etc. Those two are kind of the rational, behavioral, quantifiable components. The third one in the numerator, intimacy, an unusual word in the business context, basically means emotional safety. Can I share with you? Can I be open with you? Can I admit, my flaws to you? Can I open the kimono and share the difficulties of my life with you without feeling you're going to rip me off or abuse me or make fun of me or use it for your own advantage? And then the denominator, self-orientation, also an emotional kind of a component. Are you focused on me or on yourself? Are you trying to use me as a means to your own ends, or do you actually seem to care about me? So you can look at each of those factors, and each of them have gradations. So you can end up, as you say, what if people rate you high on credibility and reliability, but low on intimacy? Well, that's kind of a techno nerd thing. You may be a great technical servant, but I don't know. I have no idea whether I feel safe with you, so I climb up. Or you can have great intimacy skills, but very low credibility. Like he's a great guy, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. Good intentions, but what good is it if he's unreliable? He's a flake. So you can kind of dissect it in different components.
Right.
After the book came out, me and my own little firm created an online self-assessment tool, 20 questions. You could rate yourself. How do I compare on each of these 4 components? And analyzing that came up with some interesting results. About 500,000 people have taken it. And we found, for one thing, women tend to be more trustworthy than men, which men are not surprised to hear that. It's interesting. The most trustworthy profession, according to Gallup, and most people guess teachers or doctors. No, it's nurses, which makes sense if you think about it. The least trustworthy professions are things like politicians, lawyers, and used car salesmen. All of whom are very low in intimacy, which the big headline is the most powerful component turns out to be intimacy. And in all the groups that I work with, again, mostly professional services, they tend to score very low on intimacy. So one of the things in my work that I end up focusing on for all my audiences, you probably have to get better at intimacy. We know you're good technically. Lawyers are very smart. Accountants are very educated, credentialed, and so forth. But if you don't know how to talk to another person to make them feel at ease and comfortable, forget it. You'll get in the door, but you'll never get the sale. They'll listen to you, but they won't necessarily take your advice. And that's the most commonly missing component. And let me stop there. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, this is great because it opens up so many questions. For instance, you hear that a lot of times, and this is what is portrayed in media as well, so you'll know what I'm talking about. A lot of times, people like doctors and lawyers are shown as arrogant and rude.
Yes, right.
And that sort of builds their credibility, so more people want to work with them. Is that a myth, or does that actually happen?
Well, I think sometimes good doctors, I don't think, are portrayed that way. Good doctors, imagine this scenario, and it's sort of true. My daughter, when she had her first child some years ago, new parents, new child, first time. After 10 days, the kid had a cough and a fever. So they go to the pediatrician. And imagine 2 scenarios. Scenario A, the pediatrician says, yes, there's a lot of this thing going around. Take these 2 pills. Call me in the morning. Well, my daughter, and I think most people, would not buy that. She'd say, wait a minute, Dr. Google tells me there's this and that and the other. How do I know this is it? Forget it. Well, fortunately, most pediatricians know better, and they're more likely to say, well, how long has this been going on? What happens when you do this with the baby? Does the baby ever do that? By the way, cute baby. What's the baby's name? You make that, and then you can say, by the way, there's a lot of this thing going around. I think that's probably all it is. Take these 2 pills, call me in the morning. Then you accept the advice. Why? Because he made it personal. And most doctors know that. Some know it a lot better than others. If all you have is technical expertise, it's like a moth to a light. People will come to it, but they won't stay very long because, again, we rarely take advice, even if it looks technically sound. People are attracted by technical expertise and so forth, but they don't ultimately rely on it.
I agree. I know it was just a sidetracking of what we were talking about.
Oh, no, it's a very key point.
I just thought I should ask.
Yeah.
So there are multiple chapters in the book where we are talking about earning trust and developing trust. So imagine, just paint a scenario that you are a consultant,
Yeah.
and imagine that you want to work with X company. It's
Right.
not the other way around yet.
Right. Right.
So obviously you have to earn the trust, you have to develop the trust. What is the path? How do you go about doing that?
That's a great question. I think most people think, well, we'd love to go work with this client, Accenture or Google or whatever. And most people think, well, the way to do that is to get together a resume, a book of our, a collection of all our great work, referrals, and go to this target client and say, here we are, here's what we do, here's all the people that say we're great. And by the way, some people will say, by the way, we noticed you have this problem and you should probably do this, and we can help you with that. Nope, doesn't work. It really doesn't work very well at all. What works better, and we haven't talked about this, the dynamic in trust creation is there's a trustor and a trustee, one who does the trusting and one who is trusted. And all the discussion we just had is about the one who is trusted. How do you be trustworthy? That's a passive virtue. If all you do is walk around looking trustworthy, nobody's necessarily going to trust you. Somebody has to take the first risk. And here's another obvious truth. We trust people who trust us. We don't trust people who don't trust us. So if you want to be trusted, maybe you start by trusting. So the best way to do it is to figure out a way to go into a new client and trust them. So for example, you might say, gee, I noticed that you're doing this, that, and the other, and that makes a lot of sense because based on our past experience, it's that and the other. However, we did notice one interesting thing. And it occurs to us that you may be facing an issue of X. X may be a really big issue for you. Is that true? And there's only two answers to that question, and they're both good. The first one is when they say, oh, yes, X is a huge issue for us. If you know anything about X, yeah, we'd love to talk to you. That's not bad. The other way is even better. That's when the client says, everybody thinks X is the problem, but no, it's Y. In which case you say, oh my God, of course. The minute you said why, I realized, wow, tell me more about why. Well, guess what? They're delighted to tell you about why. Because everybody loves to be listened to, talked to, appreciated, respected. And here you are coming in, an accomplished person saying, wow, you know more than I do. I thought I was smart, but you're telling me I want to learn more. Talk to me. That's a way to create, you're trusting them. You're making yourself look humble, equal. You're not trying to impress people with you. You're interested in them. That's maybe the best way to get in, I think, to begin a dialogue.
It's time for a short break. Stay with us. After the break,
I would say learn to be a better listener. If that's all you do, you'll accomplish quite a bit. And by the way, listening, I know obviously people know don't just listen for data. We talk about active listening. Yeah, I think you need to go a step beyond that. The point of listening is to make sure that the other person feels heard. So you as a listener, your job is to get through to the other person that you are paying attention. You're paying attention to them. You are genuinely curious about who they are, where they're coming from, why they're saying what they're saying.
You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity, which is untapped. We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end. Welcome back. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host for Bits About Books and founder of PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. Let's dive right back into the episode where we left it. I think a couple of years back, I interviewed a gentleman called Cash Nickerson, and he wrote a book called The Samurai Listener.
Oh, interesting. I love the title.
And he practices, martial arts. And that's why the title.
Perfect.
And one of the discussions we had was we celebrate speaking, right?
Yes.
We have public speaking contests.
Yes.
We do mock parliaments, we do mock UN
Right.
in schools and colleges, where the focus is that how good a public speaker are you?
Right.
We do nothing for listening.
That's right. Yeah.
Our system, our system doesn't put any premium on
Right.
a good listener.
Right.
Yet, like you wrote, and like what the discussion I had had with Cash,
Yeah.
is that listening is such an important component of communication. And what you're really explaining to me is how do you communicate?
Yeah, well, Shubhanshu, you're exactly right. And when people ask me, I haven't read your book. I may, but give me in a nutshell, what's the single biggest piece of advice you would give? And it's that I would say, learn to be a better listener. If that's all you do, you'll accomplish quite a bit. And by the way, listening, I know obviously people know don't just listen for data. We talk about active listening. Yeah, I think you need to go a step beyond that. The point of listening is to make sure that the other person feels heard. So you as a listener, your job is to get through to the other person that you are paying attention to. You're paying attention to them. You are genuinely curious about who they are, where they're coming from, why they're saying what they're saying. And you do that. The main way to do it is simply, get into that feeling from within. You can point to some mechanical things, wait a half a second longer before you answer, pay attention, don't keep looking at your watch. But those are mechanical things. The real motivation is, am I genuinely curious about this person speaking to me in front of me? And if the point of listening is to make them feel heard, that's rare, that's valuable, that's a gift you're giving to people. And it's much appreciated.
Absolutely. And if I may add to that, it is not only what you hear, but sort of communicating to them that what they said is what you heard.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's the point of listening is not, yeah, you said it just fine. That's right. Exactly.
Let's talk about commitment. What kind of role does commitment play?
You're talking about that 5-step, there's a 5-step process.
Okay.
That we outline, called engage, listen, frame, envision, commit. LFEC for short. It's a stupid acronym, but the book's already written, so I can't change it at this point. And the commitment is simply the last step in that process. And honestly, it's the least important. The commitment is the word that we use to describe all the usual stuff we do. What's the project plan? How much is it going to cost? When's it going to take? What are the metrics to describe it? We don't really write about commitment very much. It's the end result. You don't get, I guess the main part of the book is you don't get to those steps unless you have accomplished the earlier ones, which create trust and a willingness to go forward. And the most critical step is listening. It's the second step in that 5-step process. Engage, listen, frame, envision, commit. And most people end up stopping at they never get through the listening phase. And if you don't listen, you don't get permission from the client to continue. So in a way, commitment is just the end result of having done the previous steps rightly.
Right. I understand. Would you like to touch a little bit about envisioning the alternate reality?
Yeah. There's that's a good one to pick because it's not always included. There are many models of, progressive models, step 1, 2, 3, 4, to describe conversational processes or consulting process, whatever. And most of them omit that step, what we call envisioning. Envisioning means a lot of consultants think the process is, you get people's attention, you get a good dialogue, you do a good job of listening, and at some point you frame and say, you know what, it sounds like the real problem is this. And the client says, yes, that's it. And then they jump right to all the commitment. Well, here's what we'll do about this. We're going to design this project. You're going to take this long, these metrics, etc. It's very useful to take one intermediate step, which is envisioning, which is to say, let's take a second and understand the ramifications, the implications of what we are talking about. When we're finished with this, how many cars are going to be in the parking garage? What color are those cars? Who comes to work there? What kinds of conversations do they have? Let's envision 10 years out, 20 years out, 5 years out. What's it going to look like? Because if you do that, two things happen. Number one, you point out all the flaws in your thinking to make sure it makes sense. And the other reason for that is because if you go through that process of envisioning the future, you gain much greater commitment on the part of the client. Yes, this feels right. Yes, this is something I want to do. Yep, check, check, check. That sounds great. So that's why that's kind of an important step, and it's often omitted.
this is so interesting. Again, some parallel comes to my mind, which I just want to sort of run by you.
Yeah, sure.
I read an interview with Brian Chesky, who is the co-founder of Airbnb, which you
Oh, okay. Yeah,
possibly
right.
know of, and he in this interview talks about how they try to sort of tell the hosts that tell us what kind of experience do you want your guests to have.
Ah, beautiful.
Is it
Yeah.
1 star? Is it 2 star? Is it 3 star? What will that entail? What is 4 star? And what is 11 star?
Yeah,
Like
right.
the 1 star is that there is a lock box, pick up, this is the number, take the key, just go inside, stay, and when you leave, just leave it and go.
Right.
To somewhere in between where you say, well, I know that you surf, so I actually have a surfboard in the garage which you can take, and
Yeah.
this is my access to this private beach. I have already told them that you may come, and please feel free to just go there and do as so he's building
Yeah.
up. And what is 11 star? You get down from the aircraft and there is a choir standing
Right.
there singing for you, welcoming you to my house.
Right,
you know?
right.
So I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's exactly what I'm talking about with the envisioning. And what I like
Right.
about that one is by envisioning these different levels, I'm sure most people, hosts, go in and say, I want to be a 5 star. Well, maybe a 4 star, but I want.
Yes.
And then you lay out, well, what does that mean? And many of them probably say, I'd be good with a 2 star or a 3 star. That's all I want to do. And that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's if that's your intention, but you wouldn't figure that out until, as he says, you isolate. What would that look like?
Yeah. Absolutely. So this is great. I think envisioning is so critical.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think also when we are talking of any service that we provide, most of the time the envisioning becomes very, very transactional.
Yes.
I will
Yeah.
deliver you X. I
Right.
will do Y for you, right?
Yes.
But not the impacts. And that's where I think we mix up, and that's why it's so important for me to get you back to talk about your second book.
Oh,
You
that'd be
see,
great.
there are
Yeah.
so many parallels in sales and what we are talking here.
Absolutely, Dora, which is why I wrote that second book called Trust-Based Selling, just to throw a pitch out there. You're absolutely right.
You need to move away from the transaction, because
Right.
that's only, what should I say, the brick and mortar, not the warmth of the home that
Right.
one is talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching it, if you don't mind me expanding on that for a second, you're touching on a really important point, and it's the importance of relationships as opposed to transactions. Too many people these days focus way too much just on transactions. If that's all you do, you will kill the relationship. If you pick all the fruit off the tree and that's all you do, you'll kill the tree. But if you nurture the tree, you'll have fruit for life. And to make that more practical, I'll give you an example. I did some work with an investment bank one time, a small investment bank. And before my talk, one of the guys came up to me and he said, nice to see you here. I read your book. It's really good. Trust, good stuff, yada, yada. But I must tell you, the audience that you're about to speak to, we're all here to make money. That's why we're in the investment banking business. It's a good place to make money. And I got to tell you, I get rewarded for meeting my targets. And if those targets change every quarter, I change my behavior to meet those targets, because I'm here to get rich, frankly. So you should just know who you're dealing with. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Does your company change its branding, its advertising, its corporate image every quarter? Do you change your strategy every quarter? I hope not. I'm sure you don't. But why would you change your behavior every quarter in support of your transparently self-oriented, highly selfish goals of making money? Isn't that a turnoff for your clients? I mean, how can you possibly say that? There was a managing director of Goldman Sachs, Gutfreund, I think his name was, 30 years ago or something, and he coined this great phrase. He said, we are long-term selfish, meaning in the long run, yeah, we do want to make money, but never in the short term. We have figured out that the way to make money long term is to help our clients get rich in the short term. And if we just focus on that, we'll do just fine in the long term, because it works out. Because, go back to that basic principle, if we treat people well, guess what? They're going to treat us well. If we trust them, they will trust us. If we respect them, they will respect us. If we treat them right, they will treat us right. I don't know how you prove that empirically, but it's, such a basic level common sense thing. And in so many cases, we find people focused just on the transaction and not on the overall relationship.
Absolutely. We are getting to the last part of the book, Putting Trust to Work. So I want to focus on two chapters, and feel free to choose others. This is where you are talking to the advisor and talking of the role of trust in getting hired.
Yes.
Right? And so this is really, what should I say, the fulcrum on which the book is, that why should they read the book and why should they be trusted and so on.
Right.
What do you think is the role? I know we have touched upon many of these, but just if you want to wrap it up in terms of the usability of trust.
Well, let's see. Well, you're right. We could go lots of ways with that. It's, if people trust you, many things happen. And most of these are common sense. You don't need data to prove it, but they become more open with you. They share more leads with you. They're likely to open up and tell you more about the root source of the problems. They become more willing to listen to your advice. You will get more repeat business, which is far less expensive than constantly generating new clients. So it helps your bottom line. It helps you get referrals. It makes for a better life. If you spend your life, let's say as a consultant, constantly exploring new problems, well, that's intellectually fascinating. But at the end of the day, what have you done? What difference have you made? If, on the other hand, you are able to develop a trusting relationship with a client, you can say, I made more of a difference, because you get more access, more chance to solve really deep problems on a deeper level. I'll share one little vignette. Early in my career, I know when I was a junior associate, there were several senior vice presidents in our office, but two in particular. Both of them were very good consultants, very competent technically. I had a lot of respect for both of them. But one I noticed was never in the office on weekends. And usually left the office at 5 o'clock when he was in town. The other one was in every weekend, every Saturday, Sunday, and he never left the office before 8 p.m. And it wasn't too long before I thought, ooh, I don't want to live that kind of life. What's the first guy doing that the second one isn't? And the answer became fairly clear. The first one, the one who had the life that I liked, he had two clients, both in the banking industry, both located in New York. We were in Boston, so every week he'd fly down to New York, and he'd spend all his days, walking around the halls, talking to people, meeting people, going out to dinner with them. And, he developed relationships and they became clients for life, so to speak. The second one was constantly dealing with new clients all the time, frenetically chasing, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, you know what? Not only is the first one making more of a difference, but he has a better life. So I think that's another underrated aspect of developing trusted relationships. Their economic benefits, their marketing and sales benefits, their quality of life benefits, those kinds of things.
Absolutely, and it's obvious if you ensure the client succeeds.
Yeah. Yes.
Your success is guaranteed. Pretty much
Exactly.
like what the Goldman Sachs gentleman told.
Yeah. Right.
Let's touch upon these two things. One is this cross-selling bit. What is it about? And then, of course, if you can talk about the first few steps, which is your quick impact chapter.
You take the cross-selling, which is it's a narrow technical aspect of trust, but it's a very revealing one. Cross-selling simply means if I have a client, if I'm able to sell more of the same service to somebody else within that organization, or I'm able to take some other services from my organization and sell them to that same client. Either one of those is called cross-selling. It's expanding the relationship that you have with it. The usual approach is, let's say you have that relationship and you see something in the organization, they could use this, that, or the other. And you say to them, we do that too. We have an expert in that area. I should hook you up with him and you guys can have a conversation. Here's his business card. Here's his phone number. Give him a call, or I will have him give you a call. Well, what happens usually is people nod and say, yes, that sounds great. I will call him. And then they don't. And the reason is because if you go through it, there's risk all over the place. They don't know that other person that you're talking about. They don't know that you're expert enough in that other area to be trusted with respect to that area. And they don't know this other person. So why would I, risk, my reputation within my client? Why? And there's risk, on our internal guy's side too. He's saying, well, how do I know that you know enough to recommend this person? I don't know them. So the right way to do it instead is to focus on the relationship. And you go to your internal client, and you say, listen, I think there's some things we could do, but I want to make sure I get this right. I'm not an expert in that area. Neither are you. Can you meet with me to talk to this other person? And I'm going to go back and talk to my guy inside and make sure that I'm expert just enough to give you a right introduction before I let you guys meet. In other words, you work both sides of the relationship, and then you meet them, and you go to that first meeting, and you stay at those meetings until you feel that they've achieved enough of a relationship to go off on their own. So the key to cross-selling is focus on the relationships, not on the technology or the product or the service. And it's a good example of how important trust is in a key part of business, which is developing repeat business.
See, there is so much. I don't think any sales leader or any business leader will tell you that, we can do business without trust.
Yeah. Probably true.
Nobody.
Right.
In the right senses, nobody will come and say, "I don't need to build trust. I can." Of course, if you're selling, if you're selling a cancer drug, and there also I doubt whether without trust you'll be able to sell that.
Yeah.
Why is it that our actions don't literally reflect what we say we believe?
Well, what a great question. Yeah, I'll give you an answer. The answer is fear. Fear, I think, is the root negative human emotion. And think of all the negative emotions: resentment, anger, frustration. They all have root in fear. Fear of not getting something we want, or fear of losing something we have. Fear of being embarrassed, feeling of not, all that stuff. So it's very nice, very easy to say, oh, trust is a really important thing, but that's vague. What does that even mean? People don't have a very strong sense of what trust means. Therefore, it's easy. We love democracy. We love freedom. We love trust. We love love, friendship. These are all great things to be able to salute in the abstract. But when it comes right down to it, what? You want me to trust him to do that? But then I'd have to give up this. I'd have to, I can't go there. So I think when we move from the abstract to the behavioral, to the literal, to the technical, our fears come into play. And until we can truly believe and truly understand in the general and in the specific what it means to trust somebody, to be trusted by somebody, we're going to fall prey to those fears every time when the rubber hits the road, when you have to make it come real. That's my answer. I'd be curious how you answer your own question on that one. Why is there such a disconnect between what we say and what we do?
My take is that we overvalue what we can do in the short run, and I'll come to the point, than what we will actually do in the long run. And the short run tells us that we don't have the time to build trust. Why should Charlie trust Anjan? Yeah. We don't have the time. So we have to do tactical stuff. We have to do things which will make you believe that you trust me, but I really don't care about that.
Yeah.
Right? Because I believe the buyer or the other side, the guy on the other side is a moron, because he has no intelligence. He doesn't understand anything. Right. I can tell some fancy line, or I can do some eye contact, or I can move from this side to that side. I can cross my arms, and that will make you trust me.
Yeah. Yep. You're right.
And that's my take, that nobody is playing for the long term. While I'm not fully familiar with how the market is for consultants, because I'm not really deeply into it, but I know that the average tenure of a senior VP of sales is 18 months.
Yep.
What are you going to do? You have to, if you want it more than 18 months, you have to do something this quarter. So what will you do? You will tell your guys to make more calls.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't matter if you're burning thousands of people who are prospects by making cold calls to them, because they're not waking up in the morning expecting your cold call, trying to shove something down their throat so that you can qualify them.
Totally right. Yeah, completely agree. And I get that objection a lot as you're familiar with it. And people tend to think a couple of myths. Number one, trust takes time. We hear that all the time. Trust takes time, and a variation on that is trust takes a long time to build and only a moment to destroy. Both of those are lies. They're occasionally true, but mostly they're not. Trust does not take a lot of time. It shows up the way you create trust is in the small little moments. Do you hesitate a half a second before answering that question? Do you look them in the eye? Are you genuinely curious? Do you follow up? Are you willing to have a discussion that goes where the client wants to go as opposed to your agenda? It's a handshake firm. These are the ways in which we actually establish, and they don't take long at all. And related to that, it doesn't take 18 months to build up trust. Depending on the business, depending on the situation, it may take, a minute or 2 months or 6 months. Most organizations that I work with, you can build up trust and establish it at a broad level within 6 months. So unless your horizon is less than 6 months, which most people shouldn't be, you can see results, in that time frame, which is much less than people think. But you can.
Yeah. People are not paying attention.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, they get suckered by the shiny object of my boss tells me I got to hit quarterly results. Well, yeah. Down the drain hole if that's all you think.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's wrap this up with this quick impact list. So basically, you're talking about listening to everything, empathize for real, note what they're feeling, build that shared agenda, take a point of view, take a personal risk, ask about related area, ask great questions.
Wow, we could go into each one of those, but let me just pick a few.
Yeah, sure.
Take a risk means going back to that dynamic between the trusting and the trusted. If you want to be proactive in creating trust and not just passive, like in the sales world, the phrase aggressively waiting for the phone to ring. The phone doesn't ring just by you waiting for it. If you want them to trust you, the best way to do it is to trust them. So figure out a way to trust them. And one of the ways to do that, we touched on this before, is take a risk yourself in coming up with a point of view, offering it up respectfully. Here's a thought. What do you think? Here's a hypothesis. Another one, I forget if it's on the list, but it's one of my iconic stories that I use when I give keynote speeches. If you don't know something, say, I don't know, which is the last thing most people are taught. I was talking to a guy the other day who is part of a sales consulting firm, and he said, oh my God, you never say you don't know. He said, there are only two answers. Number one, I'll get to that later in the presentation. And then you never do. Or you say, gee, I got to run and take a phone call here. And you call up somebody and say, quick, I got to find the answer to this. Those are terrible. If you don't know something, say, I don't know, which ironically is the most trust creating thing you can say. It builds your credibility instantly. It says, I am comfortable enough in my own skin and I don't know everything in the world. Why would you believe me if I said I did? That thing, I don't know. Boom, leave it there. So that's another, quick impact. The shared agenda thing you touched on, rather than walking into a meeting and saying, and just having the meeting, start off by saying, here's what I thought would be useful for us to talk about. Are you okay with that? So you get agreement right off the bat about what we're talking about. And then if you deviate from it, you can then say, gee, we're moving off in this other area. Are you okay with that? Or do you want to go back to our original agenda? And you'd be okay with either one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it shows respect. It shows it shows respect, and it shows that you are in it to be together and not some agenda that you're driving, right?
Yeah, metaphorically, you want to be sitting on the same side of the table, not opposite. I'll give you another little example that comes to mind. There's about 85. We have a little sheet called 82 Ways to Improve Your Trustworthiness. One of them is mention price early if you're in a selling situation. Most buyers, if they're sitting there in a B2B complex situation, in their mind, right at the beginning is how much is this going to cost? And most sellers are taught, don't mention price until you have established value because they won't appreciate the price. Well, that's terrible advice because it's what's on their mind. So instead, what you say is after a few minutes, you say, listen, I could be wrong, but it strikes me that this is probably going to end up somewhere between a low 6-digit number and or a high 6-digit number and a low 7-digit number. Is that roughly in the ballpark? Because I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want you to be embarrassed. We can narrow it down later as we go along, but that seems like right. And the client says, yeah, that's probably right. You've mentioned it, and you've addressed an unconscious, unspoken psychological need. You don't have to solve it right away, but for God's sakes, don't run away from it.
Yeah, yeah. That's great advice, because a lot of times, uh, especially when you think that you need to negotiate, right?
Yeah, right.
You want to understand whether you're lowballing yourself or highballing yourself,
Yeah,
and that's why I think that's the common sort of psychology which tells people that do not throw the price out, because you may be leaving money on the table.
yeah, yeah. By the way, that reminds me, if you don't mind, if you have time for another little example, practical,
Sure, please.
one of the biggest things in in the sales area, to stay in that area for a minute, is pricing. And what do you do when a client asks you for a discount? And most professional services organizations, they escalate that question higher and higher in the organization. This guy really wants a discount. Can we give him 20% off? I don't know. Let's bring it up to the executive committee and they'll talk about it. Terrible. What I've learned in my own little business was establish a policy about discounting and then stick to it. So,
Yeah.
for example, we give a discount for volume. If people buy 5 workshops instead of 1, it's cheaper for us to do it. I'm happy to pass along that discount. And we have a couple others, but that's it. Therefore, when a client calls me up and says, gee, this is great, we want to do business, we see your price, it's a little high, can we get a discount? And my answer is no. But here's what I'll tell you. You don't pay a nickel more than Google does, and Google doesn't pay a nickel less than you do. You're on an equal footing with all our important clients. I will never discount. Nobody will ever pay less than the quote that I'm giving you. And, that's our policy. And they see that as very even-handed. And it resolves a lot of questions. But it's hard to set a policy and stick to it. People want that transaction. They want that deal,
What really comes through is that each of these actions, like the one you just mentioned, is also building trust.
Right.
Right? So
Exactly.
it's not a pricing conversation. It's like you trust what I'm quoting because
That's right.
that's what everybody pays, and there is a reason why I quote that.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. When you start to think all my interactions are trust building or trust destroying interactions, and you start recognizing these fundamental principles and applying them in every little aspect of your business relationships, that's the way you create trust-based relationships, by constantly being mindful of it in all your interactions. All the interactions either increase or decrease trust.
Bits About Books is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink makes buying easy by enabling high-quality engagement between buyers and sellers through its presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create customized sales narratives using sales collaterals and personal videos, and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversations. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 99021 631 32.
Charlie, this has been wonderful. I can
Likewise.
go, actually, I can continue this for another hour.
I could too.
And I know. Of course, you can do possibly for the next 5 hours, but I can sustain for another hour, and that's why I would love to have you back to talk.
Let's
about
do this again. Absolutely, that'd be great fun.
And thank you so much. I really appreciate. Thank you, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me on, Shivarajan.
We have a fantastic lineup over the next couple of episodes with great conversations on breakthrough books. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you do not miss a single episode. Thanks for listening. Thank you for being with us today on Bits About Books, where we talk to authors about breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. We hope this conversation helped inform and motivate as we all navigate a rapidly changing business environment. For us, these are enlightening conversations enriched with knowledge and expertise. We encourage you to go out and buy the book to learn firsthand and implement some of the great ideas we discussed today. We hope to have you with us again in the next exciting episode of Bits About Books. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast from, and give us a rating while you are at it.
This Bizcast original podcast is produced for PitchLink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where the mission is to make buying easy. hosted by Subhanjan Sarkar and produced by Rajiv Aditya. See you next time and have a wonderful day.